Tom had been living on his property for 15 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. 5 acres of land with an old farmhouse, a barn that had seen better days, and a well that had been pumping clean water since before he was born. The place sat on a quiet country road where you could actually see the stars at night and hear the crickets in summer. He'd bought the land when it was cheap, back when everyone thought living this far out was crazy. No shopping centers nearby, no fancy restaurants, just open fields and the occasional neighbor waving from their tractor. Tom liked it that way. He worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, so the isolation suited him just fine. Then things started changing about 3 years ago. A developer bought the huge plot of land next to his property. Tom watched as surveyors came through, then bulldozers, then concrete trucks. Within 18 months, what used to be an old cattle pasture turned into a subdivision called Meadowbrook Heights. 47 homes, all painted in approved shades of beige and gray with perfect lawns and mailboxes that all looked exactly the same. Tom didn't mind the new neighbors at first. More people meant the county finally fixed the road, and he got better internet service. Some of the new residents even waved when they drove past his property. But then the homeowners association formed, and that's when his peaceful life started getting complicated. The HOA was run by a woman named Patricia Winters. She'd moved from the city and seemed to think the entire area should look like a photo from a home decorating magazine. She drove a white Mercedes SUV and wore sunglasses that probably cost more than Tom's monthly grocery bill. Within a month of moving in, she was elected HOA president, probably because she was the only one who actually wanted the job. The letters started arriving in Tom's mailbox about 6 months after the last house in Meadowbrook Heights sold. The first one was polite enough. It suggested that Tom might want to paint his house to maintain property values in the area. He tossed it in the recycling bin. His house was on his land and he wasn't part of their HOA. He'd checked with a lawyer just to be sure. The second letter was less polite. It mentioned his barn, which apparently was an eyesore that could be seen from several homes in the subdivision. Tom actually laughed at that one. His barn was 200 yards from the nearest HOA property line, and you could barely see it through the trees. But he ignored that letter too. Then came the letter about his well. This one had more legal-sounding language. It claimed that his unsightly well pump and housing structure detracted from the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Tom stared at that letter for a long time. His well sat in his front yard, a simple concrete housing with a pump inside. It had been there for decades. It worked perfectly, providing all the water he needed for his house, his garden, and the occasional car wash. He decided to ignore that letter too. Big mistake. Patricia showed up at his door on a Saturday morning. Tom was drinking coffee on his porch when her Mercedes pulled into his driveway. She got out wearing what looked like tennis clothes, even though Tom was pretty sure she'd never played tennis in her life. "Good morning," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to discuss our letters with you personally." Tom set down his coffee. "I got them, but I'm not part of your HOA, so I don't really see what there is to discuss." Her smile got tighter. "Well, technically that's true, but you must understand that property values affect everyone in the area. Your property is, shall we say, bringing down the tone of the neighborhood." Tom felt his jaw clench. He'd worked hard to buy this land. He paid his taxes. He didn't bother anyone. My property was here first. Your neighborhood got built next to me, not the other way around. Patricia's smile disappeared completely. "Be that as it may, we're asking you to be a good neighbor. Paint your house. Remove or relocate that unsightly well. Maybe clean up that barn or tear it down. We're even willing to help with costs if money is an issue for you." The way she said "if money is an issue" made Tom's blood boil. "I don't need your money, and I'm not changing my property. This conversation is over." She stood there for a moment, her face turning an interesting shade of red. "You're being very unreasonable. The HOA board isn't going to be happy about this." "The HOA board can take a long walk off a short pier," Tom said. "Have a nice day." After she left, Tom thought that would be the end of it. Maybe they'd send a few more letters. Maybe they'd complain to the county. But eventually they'd realize he was within his rights and leave him alone. He was wrong. The harassment ramped up over the next few months. Someone called code enforcement on him 3 times for violations that didn't exist. The inspector was apologetic each time, explaining that they had to follow up on all complaints. Tom's perfectly legal septic system was inspected, His barn was measured to ensure it met setback requirements. Someone even claimed he was running an illegal business from his home, which led to a very confused zoning officer showing up to investigate his one-man freelance operation. Tom knew it was Patricia and her HOA board. They couldn't force him to comply, so they were trying to make his life miserable instead. He consulted with his lawyer again, who told him he could sue for harassment, but it would be expensive and time-consuming. Just sit tight, the lawyer advised. They'll get bored eventually. But they didn't get bored. They got creative. Tom started noticing HOA board members walking along his property line, always with cameras or phones out, apparently documenting every blade of grass that wasn't perfectly trimmed. His mail delivery got mysteriously unreliable. Someone filed a complaint about his truck being abandoned in his own driveway because he hadn't moved it in a week. The worst part was the other homeowners. Some of them were nice people who clearly felt uncomfortable with Patricia's crusade. They'd give Tom apologetic waves or quickly change the subject when he saw them at the local store. But others had bought into the property value obsession completely. They glared at him like he was personally reaching into their pockets and stealing money. Tom tried to keep his sense of humor about it. He told himself that Patricia would eventually find a new target for her controlling personality. He focused on his work, tended his garden, and tried to ignore the feeling that walls were slowly closing in around his peaceful life. Looking back later, he'd realized that he should have seen it coming, should have known that someone like Patricia wouldn't give up just because the law was on his side, should have understood that some people, when they can't get what they want through normal channels, will find other ways. But on that ordinary Tuesday morning when he went out to get water for his coffee, he had no idea his entire life was about to turn upside down. He had no idea that Patricia had decided if she couldn't force him to get rid of his well, she'd get rid of it herself. He was about to learn that sometimes your worst neighbors aren't the ones who are noisy or rude. Sometimes the worst neighbors are the ones who smile to your face while planning to destroy everything you have. Tom woke up that Tuesday like any other day. The sun was just starting to peek through his bedroom curtains and he could hear birds outside. He shuffled to the kitchen in his pajama pants and t-shirt, ready to start the coffee maker and ease into his morning routine. He pressed the button on the coffee maker. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. Then he noticed the little light that usually indicated water in the reservoir wasn't on. That was weird. He'd filled it the night before. He went to the kitchen sink and turned the faucet. A small trickle of water came out, then nothing, just air hissing through the pipes. Tom felt the first flutter of worry in his chest. He tried the bathroom sink. Same thing. A tiny bit of water, then nothing. His well pump must have died. That was his first thought. It was old, after all. These things happened. Annoying but fixable. He'd call a well service company, they'd replace the pump, and he'd be back in business. Tom threw on jeans and a jacket and headed outside. The morning air was crisp and cool. His breath made little clouds as he walked across the front yard to where the well housing sat. Everything looked normal from the outside. The concrete housing was intact, the access door was closed. Maybe it was just an electrical issue. He opened the access door. That's when his heart sank straight into his stomach. The well was filled with concrete, not just a little bit. The entire shaft, as far as he could see down with his flashlight, was solid gray concrete. Someone had poured what must have been hundreds of pounds of concrete mix directly into his well, completely destroying it. Tom's hands started shaking. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mechanical failure. Someone had deliberately come onto his property and destroyed his only water source. He felt sick. He pulled out his phone and started checking his security camera footage. He'd installed cameras on his barn a few months ago, after the harassment from the HOA had ramped up. He'd thought they might try something, but not this. Never this. The footage from early that morning made his blood run cold. At 5:30 a.m., when it was still dark, a white pickup truck had pulled into his driveway. 3 men got out, all wearing jackets with the Meadowbrook Heights HOA logo on them. The maintenance crew. They'd brought bags of concrete mix and a portable mixer. They'd worked quickly and efficiently like they'd planned it all out ahead of time. The footage showed them breaking the lock on his well housing, mixing the concrete, and pouring it down the shaft. The whole operation took maybe 40 minutes. Then they packed up their equipment and drove away. Tom watched the timestamp. This had happened less than 3 hours ago. He saved the footage to 3 different locations, including the cloud. Then he called the police. The dispatcher said they'd send someone out. Tom asked how long. She said probably a few hours. They were dealing with a traffic accident on the highway. He hung up and tried to think about what to do next. He called his lawyer's office, got the answering service, left an urgent message. Then he sat on his porch steps and stared at the concrete-filled well, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had destroyed his water supply. In what world was that okay? In what world was that even legal? The deputy sheriff showed up around 10. Young guy, looked maybe 25. Tom showed him the well, showed him the security footage. The deputy took notes, looking more and more uncomfortable as Tom explained the situation. "So you think the HOA did this?" the deputy asked. "I don't think. I know. It's right there on video. Their maintenance crew, their truck, their equipment." The deputy chewed his lip. "I'm going to need to file a report. You'll probably want to talk to a detective. This is vandalism, maybe destruction of property, could even be some kind of utility tampering charge." "How long until someone does something about it?" Tom asked. The deputy shrugged apologetically. "I honestly don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. The system moves slow sometimes. You should definitely get a lawyer." After the deputy left, Tom called the well service company. They could come out that afternoon to assess the damage. The guy on the phone whistled when Tom explained what happened. "Never heard of anything like that before." "That's crazy." "Yeah, we'll come take a look. But if it's really filled with concrete, you're looking at drilling a whole new well. Old one's done for." "How much?" Tom asked, even though he didn't want to know the answer. "Depends on how deep we need to go, but you're probably looking at minimum 10,000, maybe 15, could be more." Tom thanked him and hung up. $10,000 to $15,000. Money he had, but money he'd been saving for a new roof next year. Money that was his, earned through his own work, now going to fix something that never should have been broken in the first place. His lawyer called back around noon. Tom explained everything. The lawyer was quiet for a long moment. "This is bad. Like really bad. This is criminal. But more than that, this is leverage. Don't talk to anyone from the HOA yet. Let me make some calls." Tom spent the afternoon watching the well service guys examine his ruined well. They confirmed what he already knew. The well was completely destroyed. The concrete had settled all the way down, probably 100 feet or more. There was no fixing it. He'd need a new well drilled. "Who would do something like this?" one of the technicians asked, shaking his head. "This is someone's water. This is serious." Tom gave him a grim smile. "My HOA, that's who." The tech's eyes widened. "Man, that's messed up. I've heard of HOAs being strict about lawn decorations and paint colors, but this is insane." Around 4 in the afternoon, Patricia showed up. Tom was standing in his yard, arms crossed, watching the well service guys pack up their equipment. He saw her Mercedes pull in and felt rage bubble up in his chest. She got out of her car with a folder in her hand and that same fake smile on her face. "Tom, I heard you were having some water problems. I wanted to stop by and see if we could help." Tom just stared at her. "You filled my well with concrete." She blinked, her smile never wavering. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. Your maintenance crew came onto my property at 5:30 this morning and destroyed my well. I have it all on video." Patricia's smile finally cracked just a little. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. However, I did want to discuss a solution to your situation. As you may know, the well you have is actually positioned very close to the HOA property line. According to our survey, it may actually encroach on our land." She pulled out papers from the folder. Tom grabbed them and looked. It was a property survey, but it was wrong. Completely wrong. The boundary line was drawn at least 30 feet off from where it actually was. This wasn't a mistake. This was a forgery. "This is fake," Tom said flatly. Patricia's smile returned, cold and sharp. "It's from a licensed surveyor. Now I understand you'll need a new water source. Conveniently, the municipal water line runs right past your property. You could connect to it for a hookup fee of $15,000, plus monthly maintenance fees as part of the HOA. We'd be happy to help you with the paperwork." Tom felt like he'd been punched. She'd destroyed his well to force him to pay to connect to their water system, and she was standing there smiling, acting like she was doing him a favor. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was extortion. "Get off my property," Tom said quietly. "Now, Tom, there's no need to be hostile. We're just trying to help you solve your problem. The problem you created. Get Off my property. Patricia's expression hardened. You're going to need water eventually. Think about our offer. Without a well, you don't have many options. She walked back to her Mercedes, got in, and drove away. Tom stood there shaking with anger. She'd destroyed his well, and was now trying to force him to pay thousands of dollars to fix her vandalism. She'd forged documents. She'd trespassed. She'd committed what was probably multiple crimes. And she was acting like she held all the cards. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer back. They just tried to extort me. I want to destroy them. Legally. Completely. Whatever it takes. His lawyer was quiet for a moment. Let me dig into something. There might be a way. Give me until tomorrow morning. Don't talk to anyone from the HOA. Don't sign anything. And definitely don't do anything rash. Tom went inside his house. He had a few gallons of bottled water. Enough for a couple days if he was careful. He'd need to figure something out soon. But more than that, he needed to figure out how to make Patricia and her HOA pay for what they'd done. He spent that evening going through every document he had about his property. The original deed, the survey from when he bought the place, the permit for his septic system. There had to be something there, some angle he was missing, and then around 10 at night he found it. Tucked into a folder of old paperwork was a copy of an easement agreement. It had been granted decades ago to the county for a water line. Tom had never paid much attention to it before. The easement ran along the edge of his property and he'd never had any problems with it. But as he read through the document, his heart started beating faster. The agreement had terms, conditions, and one of those conditions stated that the property owner retained certain rights, including the right to restrict or revoke access if the easement was misused or if the county failed to meet its obligations. Tom pulled up his property map on his computer. Then he pulled up the county's water system map, and that's when he saw it. The entire. Tom didn't sleep much that night. He kept reading and rereading the easement agreement, making sure he understood every word. The document was from 1987, written in that formal legal language that made everything sound more complicated than it was. But the core message was clear enough. The county had been granted an easement across his property to run a water main. In exchange, they'd paid the previous property owner a one-time fee and agreed to certain terms. The property owner would always have the right to reasonable use of their land. The county would maintain the line and be responsible for any damage caused during installation or maintenance. And most importantly, if the county or any third parties using the easement violated the terms or misused the access, the property owner could restrict or revoke access after proper notice. Tom pulled up the county's water system records online. He'd gotten access to them a few years back when he was researching his property boundaries. The water main that supplied Meadowbrook Heights definitely ran through the easement on his land. The developer had connected to it when they built the subdivision. It was the only water source for those 47 homes. But had the developer properly documented that connection? Had they gotten permission from Tom to use the easement, not just from the county? He started digging deeper into the public records. Around 2 a.m, drinking his third cup of coffee made from his dwindling bottled water supply, Tom found what he was looking for. Or rather, what he wasn't looking for. There was no updated easement agreement, no documentation showing that the property owner, meaning him, had agreed to allow the subdivision to tap into the water line. The developer had apparently just assumed that because the county owned the easement, they could use it however they wanted. That was wrong. The easement agreement specifically said the county and its authorized representatives could use the line. A private subdivision wasn't an authorized representative of the county. They were just customers, and they were using his land without permission. Tom saved everything to his computer and backed it up to a flash drive. Then he finally fell into bed for a few hours of restless sleep. His lawyer called at 8 the next morning. Tom was already up, sitting on his porch with more coffee, staring at the concrete-filled well like it might suddenly start working again. I did some digging, the lawyer said, and I think I found something interesting. That easement on your property. I found it too, Tom said. Last night. The subdivision is using it without proper authorization, aren't they? The lawyer laughed. You've been doing your homework. Yes, that's exactly right. The developer cut corners. They connected to the county line without properly updating the easement agreement. Technically, they're trespassing every time water flows through that pipe. So what can I do about it? Well, that's where it gets interesting. The easement agreement gives you the right to restrict access if there's misuse. And I'd say someone from that subdivision coming onto your property and destroying your well definitely counts as misuse. Tom felt a grim smile spread across his face. So I can shut off their water? Legally, yes. But it's not quite that simple. You'd need to follow proper procedure, file a formal complaint with the county, provide evidence of the misuse, give notice that you're exercising your right to restrict access. The county would have to investigate, and if they confirm your claims, they'd be obligated to either fix the situation or cut off service to the subdivision. How long would that take? That's the beautiful part. Because this involves a potential health and safety issue destroying someone's water supply, the county has to act fast. We're talking days, not weeks. If we file today and provide solid evidence, the county could issue a notice by tomorrow. Tom thought about Patricia's smug face when she'd offered to let him connect to the water system for $15,000. Let's do it. They spent the next 2 hours on the phone and email putting together the complaint. Tom sent over the security footage of the HOA crew destroying his well. He included photos of the concrete-filled shaft. He attached the police report from the deputy's visit. He included the fake survey Patricia had shown him, along with his real survey showing that his well was completely on his own property. And he included copies of the easement agreement, highlighting the sections about misuse and the property owner's rights. The lawyer filed everything with the county water department and the county attorney's office. Then they waited. Tom spent the afternoon dealing with practical matters. He drove into town and bought 30 gallons of bottled water. He filled up every container he had. He could shower at the local gym if needed. He could use the bathroom at the coffee shop. It wasn't ideal, but he could manage for a while. What Patricia and the rest of Meadowbrook Heights couldn't manage was 47 families without water. Tom knew that. They knew that. And soon the county was going to know that too. The county engineer called Tom's phone at 4:30 that afternoon. Tom had never met the man before, but he sounded stressed. "Mr. Henderson, this is Robert Chen from the county water department. I just received your complaint about the easement on your property." "That's right," Tom said. "I've reviewed the documentation you provided. The security footage, the police report, all of it. I have to tell you, this is extremely concerning. If what you're alleging is true, and it certainly appears to be, this is a serious violation. So what happens now?" "I need to do some investigating on our end, but based on what I'm seeing, the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision is using the water main on your property without proper authorization, and if their representatives vandalized your well, which again the evidence strongly suggests they did, then you have every right to restrict access to that easement." Tom could hear papers rustling on the other end of the line. "The problem is, Mr. Henderson, we're talking about 47 families. Homes with children. If we shut off their water, even temporarily, it's going to create a major crisis. They should have thought about that before they destroyed my well," Tom said flatly. "I'm one person, and I don't have water right now because of them. Why should I care if they go through the same thing?" There was a long silence. "You're absolutely right," the engineer finally said. "This isn't your fault, and you're the victim here. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to handle this situation." "Here's how you handle it," Tom said. "You contact the HOA. You tell them that they violated the easement agreement through their actions. You tell them that unless they make this right immediately, I'm going to exercise my legal right to restrict access, and you're going to have to shut off their water." What would making it right look like? They pay for a new well to be drilled. They compensate me for damages. They issue a formal apology and guarantee in writing that they'll never interfere with my property again. And they properly document their use of the easement with all the correct legal paperwork. The engineer sighed. "I'll contact their HOA board tonight. And Mr. Henderson, for what it's worth, I'm sorry this happened to you. This is not how things are supposed to work." After they hung up, Tom sat on his porch and watched the sunset. He felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not quite satisfaction, not yet. But maybe hope. Maybe the sense that justice might actually be possible. The next morning, Tom's lawyer called with an update. "The county is issuing a formal notice to the HOA today. They have 72 hours to respond with a plan to resolve the situation, or the county will be forced to disconnect their water service." 72 hours? Tom said, like that's 3 days. Actually, it's even better than that. The clock started at midnight last night when the county engineer filed his preliminary findings. So they really have about 60 hours. Tom did the math in his head. That meant by Saturday afternoon, either the HOA would agree to fix everything, or an entire subdivision would be without water for the weekend. What do you think they'll do? I think they'll panic, the lawyer said with a chuckle. And then I think they'll do exactly what we want them to do. He was right. Tom's phone started ringing that afternoon. First, it was a number he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail. Patricia's voice, no longer smug, trying to sound reasonable. Tom, we should talk about this. I'm sure we can work something out. Then another call an hour later. A different number, a man's voice. Mr. Henderson, my name is David and I'm on the HOA board. We'd really like to meet with you to discuss this water situation. We're sure there's been some misunderstanding. More calls throughout the evening. The voicemails got progressively more desperate. By the fifth one, Patricia wasn't even pretending to be polite anymore. You're going to leave 47 families without water? Including children? What kind of person are you? Tom listened to that one twice, his jaw clenched. What kind of person was he? He was the kind of person who'd been minding his own business when his neighbors destroyed his property. He was the kind of person who'd tried to be left alone and got harassed for months. He was the kind of person who'd just had his water supply deliberately destroyed. And now people were acting like he was the bad guy for defending himself. He deleted all the voicemails without responding. The next day, Friday, the county engineer called again. The HOA has requested an emergency meeting with you and county representatives. Tomorrow, Mo. They all sat around the table on Tom's porch. It felt surreal, like some kind of bizarre negotiation scene from a movie. Patricia sat stiffly in her chair, her arms crossed. The other two board members looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. The lawyers had their folders open, pens ready. The county engineer sat at the end, looking like a referee at a boxing match. Tom's lawyer spoke first. Let's establish the facts before we discuss terms. Mr. Henderson's well was deliberately destroyed by individuals working for the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. We have video evidence. We have a police report. The county has confirmed that the subdivision's use of the water main running through Mr. Henderson's property was never properly authorized. These are not allegations. These are facts. Patricia's lawyer nodded slowly. My clients are willing to acknowledge that an incident occurred regarding the well. The exact circumstances are still unclear, but they're willing to take responsibility for making the situation right. The exact circumstances are on video, Tom said. Your maintenance crew broke into my well and filled it with concrete. There's nothing unclear about it. One of the other board members, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, spoke up. We didn't know. Patricia told us she was having the well inspected for safety reasons. We never authorized any destruction of property. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel. That's not important right now. Actually, it is important, the county engineer said. Because if the board acted without proper knowledge or authority, that affects how we move forward with this. Ms. Winters, did you personally authorize the destruction of Mr. Henderson's well? Patricia's jaw clenched. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered in her ear. She shook her head. I'm not answering any questions without advice from my attorney. You don't have to answer, Tom said. It doesn't matter who specifically gave the order. Your crew did it. Your HOA is responsible. Now we're going to talk about how you fix it. Tom's lawyer pulled out a document. These are our terms. First, the HOA will pay for a new well to be drilled on Mr. Henderson's property. We've already gotten quotes. The cost is approximately $12,000. The work will be completed within 2 weeks. Patricia's lawyer wrote notes. That's reasonable. What else? Second, the HOA will pay Mr. Henderson $50,000 in compensation. This covers damages to his property, emotional distress, the inconvenience of being without water, lost work time, and legal fees. Patricia's head snapped up. $50,000? That's absurd. Is it? Tom asked. You destroyed my only water source. I've had to buy bottled water, shower at the gym, and completely disrupt my life. I've had to hire a lawyer. I've had to take time away from my work. And let's not forget the months of harassment before this. The fake code enforcement complaints. The forged survey documents. $50,000 is getting off easy and you know it. The third board member, a woman with graying hair, spoke quietly. How much is in the HOA reserve fund right now? Patricia didn't answer. The woman pulled out her phone and checked something. We have about $65,000 in reserves. If we pay this, we'll have almost nothing left for emergencies. Should have thought about that before destroying someone's well, Tom said. The county engineer cleared his throat. Let's remember, if we don't resolve this today, the entire subdivision loses water service. And I've checked the county regulations. Once service is disconnected due to easement violations, it can take weeks or even months to restore it, even after the violations are corrected. There's paperwork, inspections, hearings. It's not a quick process. Patricia's lawyer leaned back in his chair. So you're saying we don't really have a choice? You have a choice, Tom's lawyer said. You can agree to these terms and resolve this today, or you can let it drag through the courts while your client's constituents go without water. I'm sure the homeowners in Meadowbrook Heights will be understanding when you explain why their children can't take baths and their toilets don't flush. One of the board members put his head in his hands. This is a nightmare. What else? Patricia asked, her voice tight. You said first and second. What else do you want? Tom's lawyer continued. Third, the HOA will issue a formal written apology to Mr. Henderson, acknowledging wrongdoing and guaranteeing that there will be no further interference with his property. This apology will be delivered to every homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights, so they understand why this situation occurred. You want us to admit guilt publicly? Patricia said. That will open us up to lawsuits from our own homeowners. That's your problem, Tom said. You committed the crime. You deal with the consequences, the county engineer spoke up. Actually, that might be necessary from our perspective too. The county needs documentation that the easement violation has been acknowledged and resolved. A formal apology could serve that purpose. Patricia's lawyer made more notes. What's the fourth term? Fourth, all easement documentation will be properly updated and filed with the county, clearly showing that Meadowbrook Heights has permission to use the water main running through Mr. Henderson's property. This will be done at the HOA's expense, and it will include provisions that ensure Mr. Henderson's rights as the property owner are protected. If there are any future disputes about the easement, they'll be resolved through proper legal channels, not through harassment or property destruction. Fine, Patricia said. Is that everything? Tom leaned forward. One more thing. You resign as HOA president immediately. The table went silent. Patricia stared at him. You can't demand that. I can demand whatever I want. You destroyed my property. You forged documents. You tried to extort me. Do you really think the homeowners in your subdivision want someone like you running their HOA once they find out what you did? The male board member spoke up again. Actually, Tom has a point. Patricia, when the residents find out about this, and they will find out, there's going to be a recall vote anyway. You might as well step down now with some dignity. Patricia looked around the table. Nobody was meeting her eyes. Even her lawyer looked uncomfortable. This is ridiculous. I've been working to improve property values. Everything I did was for the good of the community. You destroyed someone's well. The female board member said quietly, How is that for the good of the community? Tom watched Patricia's face as reality finally seemed to sink in. She'd pushed too hard, gone too far, and now she was losing everything. Part of him felt a little bit sorry for her. A very small part. The rest of him remembered standing in his yard, looking at his concrete-filled well and feeling completely helpless. Patricia's lawyer whispered to her again. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. Fine, I'll resign, but this whole situation is still absurd. So we have an agreement? The county engineer asked. The HOA pays for a new well, pays $50,000 in damages, issues a formal apology, updates the easement documentation, and Ms. Winters resigns as president. In exchange, Mr. Henderson allows the water service to continue? Tom looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded. Yes, Tom said. That's the agreement. We'll need this in writing, Patricia's lawyer said. A formal settlement agreement signed by all parties. I can have a draft ready this afternoon, Tom's lawyer said. We can meet back here at 4 o'clock to sign. The county engineer stood up. Good. I'll hold off on the disconnection notice until the agreement is signed. But I want to be clear. If anything falls through, if the HOA doesn't follow through on these terms, the water gets shut off immediately. No more negotiations, everyone nodded. The meeting broke up. Patricia and her board members walked to their cars without saying another word. The county engineer shook Tom's hand. I'm glad we could resolve this. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure we would. Thank you for taking this seriously, Tom said. It's my job. but also what happened to you was wrong. I'm glad the system worked this time." After everyone left, Tom sat on his porch with his lawyer. "Did that really just happen?" His lawyer grinned. "It really did. You're about to get a new well, $50,000, and your neighbors are going to leave you alone. I'd say that's a pretty good outcome. What about criminal charges? For the vandalism? That's up to the district attorney. But honestly, with the settlement in place and the HOA making things right, they probably won't prosecute. The police and prosecutors don't like to waste time on cases where the victim has already been made whole." Tom thought about that. Part of him wanted Patricia to face criminal charges, wanted her to have a record to really pay for what she'd done. But another part of him just wanted this to be over, wanted to get back to his quiet life. "I'll leave it up to them," Tom said. "If they want to prosecute, fine. If not, I'm okay with that too." They spent the afternoon drafting the settlement agreement. Tom's lawyer was thorough, making sure every detail was spelled out clearly. The payment schedule, the timeline for the new well, the exact wording of the apology, the process for updating the easement documents. Nothing was left to chance. At 4 o'clock, everyone returned to Tom's house. This time there was less tension. They were just here to sign papers and make it official. Patricia looked defeated. The other board members looked relieved. The lawyers looked satisfied. They all signed. Multiple copies, multiple signatures. Tom's lawyer collected everything and promised to fill it. The well drilling crew showed up on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the settlement was signed. Tom watched from his porch as they unloaded their equipment. Big truck, drilling rig, all the tools needed to punch a hole deep into the earth and find water. The crew chief walked over to introduce himself. Older guy, probably in his 60s, with weathered hands and a friendly smile. "You're the guy with the HOA trouble, right? I heard about this job from my dispatcher. Said someone filled your well with concrete. That true?" Tom gestured toward the old well housing. "See for yourself." The crew chief walked over and looked. He let out a low whistle. "In 30 years of drilling wells, I've never seen anything like that. Someone really had it out for you." "They sure did, but I had it out for them right back." The crew chief laughed. "Good for you. Well, we're going to set you up with a nice deep well. Go down about 200 feet, find you a good aquifer. You'll have better water than you ever had before." They got to work. The drilling rig was loud, shaking the ground as it bore down into the earth. Tom tried to work inside, but he kept getting distracted by the noise and the activity. Finally, he just gave up and sat on his porch, drinking coffee and watching. A few neighbors from Meadowbrook Heights drove by slowly, staring. Tom waved. Some of them waved back. Others just kept driving. He wondered how much they knew about what had happened. The formal apology was supposed to go out to every homeowner, but he hadn't seen a copy yet. Around noon, Tom's phone rang. It was the female board member who'd taken over as interim HOA president. Her name was Linda. "Hi, Tom. I wanted to let you know we sent out the apology letter yesterday. It went to every household in Meadowbrook Heights. I also wanted to apologize personally for what Patricia did. Some of us on the board had concerns about her approach to things, but we never imagined she'd do something like this." "I appreciate that," Tom said. "How are people taking the news?" Linda sighed. "About how you'd expect. Some people are angry we had to pay so much money. Some are angry at Patricia. A lot of people are just embarrassed that their HOA did something so awful. We're having an emergency meeting next week to discuss new leadership and new policies. We want to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "That sounds good. For what it's worth, I don't have any problem with most of your residents. I just wanted to be left alone, and you will be. That's going to be our new policy. We manage the subdivision, and we leave everyone outside the subdivision alone. It should have been that way from the start." After they hung up, Tom felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe. Or just the sense that things were finally really over. The nightmare was done. Life could go back to normal. The drilling crew worked for 3 days. Tom brought them cold drinks and sandwiches, and they updated him on their progress. On the 3rd day, they hit a good aquifer at 180 feet. Clean, clear water flowing at a rate that would give Tom more than enough for his house and property. "This is good water," the crew chief said, showing Tom a sample. "Better than what you probably had before. You're all set." They installed a new pump, new piping, everything state-of-the-art. By the end of the week, Tom had running water again. He turned on his kitchen faucet and just watched it flow for a minute. Such a simple thing. Such an easy thing to take for granted. Until someone takes it away. The $50,000 check arrived on a Friday. Tom stared at it for a long time. It felt strange holding that much money in his hands. Money that never should have been necessary. Money that represented months of harassment and one morning of vandalism. He deposited the check and paid his lawyer. That took about $15,000. He put another $15,000 in savings. The rest he decided to use to finally fix his barn and make some improvements to his property. Maybe add some better security cameras. Maybe build a fence along the property line, just to make it crystal clear where his land ended and the HOAs began. A few weeks later, Tom was working in his garden when a car pulled into his driveway. He didn't recognize it. His hand automatically went to his phone, ready to call someone if this was more HOA trouble. But the woman who got out looked nervous, not aggressive. "Are you Tom?" she asked. "That's me. I'm Rachel. I live in Meadowbrook Heights over on Maple Drive. I hope this isn't weird, me just showing up like this. I got your address from the county records." Tom set down his gardening tools and wiped his hands on his jeans. "What can I do for you?" Rachel looked embarrassed. "I wanted to apologize. My husband and I bought our house 2 years ago. When Patricia started her campaign against you, some of us went along with it. We complained about your property at HOA meetings. We didn't do anything illegal, but we were part of the problem. And after we got that letter explaining what really happened, I felt terrible. You were just living your life and we made you feel unwelcome. I'm sorry." Tom hadn't expected this. He'd figured most of the residents would just want to forget the whole thing happened. "Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. My husband builds furniture. If you ever need anything fixed or built, he'd be happy to help, free of charge. It's the least we can do." After Rachel left, Tom stood in his driveway for a while, thinking, maybe not everyone in Meadowbrook Heights was bad. Maybe most of them were just normal people who'd gotten caught up in Patricia's crusade. Maybe there was hope for being actual neighbors instead of enemies. A month after the settlement, Tom was getting his mail when he saw Patricia drive by. She didn't live in the subdivision anymore. Linda had told him that Patricia and her husband had put their house up for sale within a week of her resignation. They'd moved out 2 weeks ago, even before the house sold. Apparently, staying in a neighborhood where everyone knew what you'd done wasn't very comfortable. Their eyes met for just a second as she drove past. Tom didn't wave. Neither did she. She just kept driving, and that was fine with him. He hoped she'd learned something from all this. Probably not, but he could hope. Life settled into a new rhythm. Tom's new well worked perfectly. His garden thrived with the good water. He finished fixing up his barn and installed new security cameras just in case. But there were no more HOA letters. No more harassment. No more problems. Some of the Meadowbrook Heights residents started waving when they drove by. A few even stopped to chat if they saw him outside. Tom met Linda's husband, who turned out to be a pretty good guy and a fellow fan of old science fiction movies. They started having the occasional beer together on weekends. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. There were still people who gave Tom dirty looks, probably upset about the $50,000 that came out of the HOA reserves. But they kept their distance, and that was all Tom wanted. One Saturday afternoon, about 3 months after everything had settled, Tom was sitting on his porch when a young couple pulled into his driveway. They looked like they were in their late 20s, clearly nervous. "Hi," the man said. "We're thinking about buying a house in Meadowbrook Heights. We heard there was some kind of issue with the HOA and a neighbor. Would you mind telling us about it?" Tom smiled. Smart buyers doing their research. "Sure, come sit down. I'll tell you the whole story." He gave them the abbreviated version. The harassment, the destroyed well, the easement, the settlement. They listened with wide eyes. "So the HOA destroyed your well?" the woman asked. "That's insane. The old HOA president did, yes. She's gone now. The new board seems much more reasonable." The couple looked at each other. "We're not sure we want to live somewhere where the HOA would do something like that," the man said. "I don't blame you. But I'll tell you this. What happened to me was terrible, but it also changed things. The new board has strict policies about respecting property rights. They're not allowed to do anything beyond their actual jurisdiction, and every homeowner in that subdivision knows what happened when the old president overstepped. They're not going to let it happen again." The woman nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Do you think it's safe to buy there now?" Tom thought about it. "Yeah, I do. The people who live there are mostly good folks. They just had bad leadership for a while. If you like the house and the neighborhood, I wouldn't let my situation scare you off. Just make sure you read the HOA bylaws carefully and know your rights." They thanked him and left. Tom watched them drive away, heading toward Meadowbrook Heights. He hoped they'd buy a house there. Hoped they'd be good neighbors. Hoped that maybe, eventually, this whole area could just be a normal community where people respected each other. As the sun set that evening, Tom stood in his yard and looked at his property. His fixed barn, his thriving garden, his new well pumping clear water from deep in the earth, his house looking the same as it always had, weathered and lived in, and his. He'd fought for this place. Really fought, harder than he'd ever thought he'd have to, and he'd won. Not just the legal battle, but something bigger. He'd stood up for himself when someone tried to bully him. He'd found leverage when everyone thought he was powerless. He'd proved that you don't have to be part of an HOA or a big organization to have rights worth defending. Tom's phone buzzed. Text message from Linda. "HOA meeting tonight went well. New policies are in place. Also, we're organizing a neighborhood barbecue next month. You're invited if you want to come. No pressure." Tom smiled and typed back, "I'll think a bee."